Gibraltar. Gibraltar is a British overseas territory and city located at the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, on the Bay of Gibraltar, near the exit of the Mediterranean Sea into the Atlantic Ocean, Strait of Gibraltar. It has an area of 6.8 square kilometers, 2.6 square miles, and is bordered to the north by Spain, Campo de Gibraltar. The landscape is dominated by the Rock of Gibraltar, at the foot of which is a densely populated town area. Gibraltar is home to some 34,003 people, primarily Gibraltarians. Gibraltar was founded as a permanent watchtower by the Almohads in 1160. It switched control between the Nasrids, Castilians and Marinids in the late Middle Ages, acquiring larger strategic clout upon the destruction of nearby Algeciras Sea. 1375. It became again part of the Crown of Castile in 1462. In 1704, Anglo-Dutch forces captured Gibraltar from Spain during the War of the Spanish Succession, and it was ceded to Great Britain in perpetuity under the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713. It became an important base for the Royal Navy, particularly during the Napoleonic Wars and World War II, as it controlled the narrow entrance and exit to the Mediterranean Sea, the Strait of Gibraltar, with half the world's seaborne trade passing through it. The sovereignty of Gibraltar is a point of contention in Anglo-Spanish relations as Spain asserts a claim to the territory. Gibraltarians overwhelmingly rejected proposals for Spanish sovereignty in a 1967 referendum and for shared sovereignty in a 2002 referendum. Nevertheless, Gibraltar maintains close economic and cultural links with Spain, with many Gibraltarians speaking Spanish as well as a local dialect known as Lanido. Gibraltar's economy rests on financial services, e-gaming, tourism, and the port. With one of the world's lowest unemployment rates, the largest part of the labor force are resident in Spain or non-Gibraltarians, especially in the private sector. Since Brexit, Gibraltar is not a member of the European Union, but negotiations are underway to have it participate in the Schengen Agreement to facilitate border movements between Gibraltar and Spain. As of March 2023, talks seem deadlocked. Name. The name is derived from Arabic, Romanized, Jabal Riklit, Mount of Tariq, named after the 8th century North African military leader Tariq ibn Ziyad, who began the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula via the Strait of Gibraltar in 711. History. Evidence of Neanderthal habitation in Gibraltar from around 50,000 years ago has been discovered at Gorham's Cave. The caves of Gibraltar continued to be used by Homo sapiens after the final extinction of the Neanderthals. Stone tools, ancient hearths, and animal bones dating from around 40,000 years ago to about 5,000 years ago have been found in deposits left in Gorham's Cave. Numerous potsherds dating from the Neolithic period have been found in Gibraltar's caves, mostly of types typical of the Almerian culture, found elsewhere in Andalusia, especially around the town of Almeria, from which it takes its name. There is little evidence of habitation in the Bronze Age, when people had largely stopped living in caves. Middle Ages. After the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, Gibraltar came briefly under the control of the Vandals, who crossed into Africa at the invitation of Boniface, the count, or commander, of the territory. Following a raid in 710, a predominantly Berber army under the command of Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed from North Africa in April 711 and landed somewhere in the vicinity of Gibraltar, though most likely not in the bay or at the rock itself. Tariq's expedition led to the Islamic conquest of most of the Iberian Peninsula. Mons Calpe was renamed Jabal Rik, the Mount of Tariq, subsequently corrupted into Gibraltar. In 1160, the Almohad Sultan Abd al-Mumin ordered that a permanent settlement, including a castle, be built. It received the name of Medinat al-Fath, City of the Victory. The Tower of Homage of the Moorish castle remains standing today. From 1274 onwards, the town was fought over and captured by the Nasrids of Granada. In 1237 and 1374, the Marinids of Fez in 1274 and 1333, and the Kings of Castile in 1309. Upon the Nasrid destruction and abandonment of Algeciras Sea, 1375, and Nasrid's procurement of Gibraltar away from Marinids in 1375, the Nasrids favored Gibraltar, a worse natural harbor than Algeciras, but featuring better defense capabilities as a military and urban outpost in the strait, although Gibraltar did not ever reach a large population during this period. Modern era. After the conquest, Henry IV of Castile assumed the additional title of King of Gibraltar, establishing it as part of the comarca of the Campo de Gibraltar. 6 years later, Gibraltar was restored to the Duke of Medina Sidonia, who sold it in 1474 to a group of 4,350 conversos, Christian converts from Judaism, from Cordova and Seville, and in exchange for maintaining the garrison of the town for 2 years, after which time they were expelled, returning to their hometowns or moving on to other parts of Spain. 38. In 1501, Gibraltar passed back to the Spanish crown, and Isabella I of Castile issued a royal warrant granting Gibraltar the coat of arms that it still uses. In 1540, Gibraltar was captured and ransacked by Ottoman Admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa. The raid of the small town eliminated nearly an entire generation of Gibraltarians. In 1704, during the War of the Spanish Succession, a combined Anglo-Dutch fleet, representing the Grand Alliance, captured the town of Gibraltar on behalf of the Archduke Charles of Austria in his campaign to become King of Spain. Subsequently, most of the population left the town, with many settling nearby. As the Alliance's campaign faltered, the 1713 Treaty of Utrecht was negotiated, which ceded control of Gibraltar to Britain to secure Britain's withdrawal from the war. Unsuccessful attempts by Spanish monarchs to regain Gibraltar were made, with the Siege of 1727, and again with the Great Siege of Gibraltar, 1779 to 1783, during the American War of Independence. Citation needed. After the destructive Great Siege, the town was almost entirely rebuilt. Giovanni Maria Boschetti, who arrived in Gibraltar in 1784 as a 25-year-old from Milan, where he is thought to have been a stonemason or engineer, built the Victualling Yard, completed in 1812, and many other buildings. Boschetti is regarded as having been responsible for setting the Old Town style, described by Claire Monadou, chief executive of the Gibraltar Heritage Trust, as military ordnance-style arched doorways, Italianate stucco relief, Genoese shutters, English Regency ironwork balconies, Spanish stained glass and Georgian sash and casement windows. During the Napoleonic Wars, Gibraltar became a key base for the Royal Navy and played an important role leading up to the Battle of Trafalgar, October 21, 1805. Designated one of 4 imperial fortresses, along with Halifax, Nova Scotia, Bermuda, and Malta, its strategic location made it a key base during the Crimean War of 1854 to 1856. In the 18th century, the peacetime military garrison fluctuated in numbers from a minimum of 1,100 to a maximum of 5,000. The first half of the 19th century saw a significant increase of population to more than 17,000 in 1860, as people from Britain and all around the Mediterranean, Italian, Portuguese, Maltese, Jewish, and French, took up residence in the town. Its strategic value increased with the opening of the Suez Canal, as it lay on the sea route between the UK and the British Empire east of Suez. In the later 19th century, major investments were made to improve the fortifications and the port. Contemporary history. Shown here during the Second World War, a Douglas Dakota of BC is silhouetted at Gibraltar by the batteries of searchlights on the rock, as crews prepare it for a night flight to the United Kingdom. During the Second World War, most of Gibraltar's civilian population was evacuated, mainly to London, but also to parts of Morocco and Madeira, and to Gibraltar Camp in Jamaica. The rock was strengthened as a fortress. On July 18, 1940, the Vichy French Air Force attacked Gibraltar in retaliation for the British bombing of the Vichy Navy. The naval base and the ships based there played a key role in the provisioning and supply of the island of Malta during its long siege, as well as frequent short runs, known as club runs, towards Malta to fly off aircraft reinforcements, initially Hurricanes, but later, notably from the USN aircraft carrier Wasp Spitfires. The critical Operation Pedestal Convoy was run from Gibraltar in August 1942. This resupplied the island at a critical time in the face of concentrated air attacks from German and Italian forces. Spanish dictator Francisco Franco's reluctance to allow the German army onto Spanish soil frustrated a German plan to capture the rock, codenamed Operation Felix. In the 1950s, Franco renewed Spain's claim to sovereignty over Gibraltar and restricted movement between Gibraltar and Spain. Gibraltarians voted overwhelmingly to remain under British sovereignty in the 1967 Gibraltar Sovereignty Referendum, which led to the passing of the Gibraltar Constitution Order in 1969. In response, Spain completely closed the border with Gibraltar and severed all communication links. The border with Spain was partially reopened in 1982 and fully reopened in 1985 before Spain's accession to the European Community. In the early 2000s, Britain and Spain were in negotiations over a potential agreement that would see them sharing sovereignty over Gibraltar. The government of Gibraltar organized a referendum on the plan, and 99% of the population voted to reject it. In 2008, the British government committed to respecting the Gibraltarians' wishes. 49. A new constitution order was approved in referendum in 2006. A process of tripartite negotiations started in 2006 between Spain, Gibraltar, and the UK, ending some restrictions and dealing with disputes in some specific areas, such as air movements, customs procedures, telecommunications, pensions, and cultural exchange. In the British referendum on membership of the European Union, 96% of Gibraltarians voted to remain on an 84% turnout. Spain renewed calls for joint Spanish-British control of the peninsula. These were strongly rebuffed by Gibraltar's chief minister. On October 18, 2018, however, Spain seemed to have reached an agreement with the United Kingdom in relation to its objections to Gibraltar leaving the EU with the UK, with Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez stating, "Gibraltar will no longer be a problem in arriving at a Brexit deal." On January 31, 2020, the UK left the European Union, and consequently so did Gibraltar. Under the terms of the transition phase in the Brexit withdrawal agreement, Gibraltar's relationship with the EU continued unchanged until the end of 2020, when it was replaced by the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. On December 31, 2020, the UK and Spain agreed in principle on a basis for the EU and the UK to negotiate an agreement through which Gibraltar would participate in the Schengen area, to avoid a hard border with Spain. The arrangements have not entered into force. In 2022, Gibraltar launched a bid for city status as part of the Platinum Jubilee Civic Honors. The bid was refused, but when researchers looked through the National Archives, they found that it had already been recognized as a city by Queen Victoria in 1842. The status came into force on August 29, 2022. Governance. Main article, Politics of Gibraltar. Under its current constitution, Gibraltar has almost complete internal self-governance through a parliament elected for a term of up to 4 years. The unicameral parliament presently consists of 17 elected members, and the Speaker, who is not elected but appointed by a resolution of the Parliament. The government consists of 10 elected members. The head of state is the British monarch King Charles III, who is represented by the Governor of Gibraltar. The governor enacts day-to-day matters on the advice of the Gibraltar Parliament, but is responsible to the British government in respect of defense, foreign policy, internal security, and general good governance. Judicial and other appointments are made on behalf of the monarch in consultation with the head of the elected government. The 2011 election was contested by the Gibraltar Social Democrats, GSD, Gibraltar Socialist Labour Party, GSLP, Liberal Party of Gibraltar, LPG, Alliance, and the Progressive Democratic Party, PDP. The PDP was a new party, formed in 2006 and fielded candidates in the 2007 election, but none were elected. The head of government is the chief minister, as of December 2011, Fabian Picardo. All local political parties oppose any transfer of sovereignty to Spain, instead supporting self-determination. The main UK opposition parties also support this policy, and it is British government policy not to engage in talks about the sovereignty of Gibraltar without the consent of the people of Gibraltar. Gibraltar was part of the European Union, having joined through the European Communities Act 1972 UK, which gave effect to the Treaty of Accession 1972, as a dependent territory of the United Kingdom under what was then Article 227(4) of the treaty establishing the European Community covering special member state territories, with exemption from some areas, such as the European Union Customs Union, Common Agricultural Policy, and the Schengen area. It is the only British overseas territory which was part of the European Union. After a 10-year campaign for the right to vote in European elections, from 2004 to 2019 the people of Gibraltar participated in elections for the European Parliament as part of the South West England constituency. On June 23, 2016 Gibraltar voted along with the United Kingdom in the EU referendum. 96% of its population voted to remain, but the overall United Kingdom result gave a 51.9% majority to leaving the EU. Nevertheless, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez stated on October 18, 2018 that Gibraltar was nominated to be included on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories by the United Kingdom when the list was created in 1946 and has been listed ever since. The government of Gibraltar has actively worked to have Gibraltar removed from a list, and in 2008 the British government declared Gibraltar's continued presence on the list an anachronism. Gibraltar is not a member of the Commonwealth of Nations in its own right and is represented by the United Kingdom, but was granted associate membership of the Commonwealth Foundation in 2004. Gibraltar has competed in the Commonwealth Games since 1958. International relations. Gibraltar is not a sovereign state. Its formal international relations are the responsibility of the government of the United Kingdom. Since Brexit, it is not part of the European Union, but is a participant in the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. On December 31, 2020, the UK and Spain agreed in principle on a basis for the EU and the UK to negotiate an agreement through which Gibraltar would participate in the Schengen area, to avoid a hard border with Spain. The arrangements have not entered into force, but both sides aim to keep delays at the border at a minimum in the meantime. As of March 2023, talks remain stalled, with Spain insisting that its Policia Nacional control entry into the Schengen area, and the UK demanding that the work be done by officers of the European Union agency Frontex. All other entry points to the Schengen area are controlled by national authorities, supplemented by Frontex in some places. Geography. Gibraltar's territory covers 6.8 square kilometers, 2.6 km, and shares a 1.2 kilometers, 0.75 miles, land border with Spain. The town of La Línea de la Concepción, a municipality of the province of Cádiz, lies on the Spanish side of the border. The Spanish hinterland forms the comarca of Campo de Gibraltar, literally countryside of Gibraltar. The shoreline measures 12 kilometers, 7.5 miles in length. There are two coast sides of Gibraltar. The east side, which contains the settlements of Sandy Bay and Catalan Bay, and the west side, where the vast majority of the population lives. Gibraltar has no administrative divisions, but is divided into 7 major residential areas, having negligible natural resources and few natural freshwater resources, limited to natural wells in the north. Until recently, Gibraltar used large concrete or natural rock water catchments to collect rainwater. Fresh water from the boreholes is nowadays supplemented by 2 desalination plants, a reverse osmosis plant constructed in a tunnel within the rock, and a multi-stage flash distillation plant at North Mole. Gibraltar's terrain consists of the 426 m high, 1,398 feet, Rock of Gibraltar made of Jurassic limestone, and the narrow coastal lowland surrounding it. It contains many tunneled roads, most of which are still operated by the military and closed to the general public. Environment. In May 2016, a report by the World Health Organization showed that Gibraltar had the worst air quality in any British territory. The report concentrated on PM10 and PM2.5 pollutants in the air. Economy. The semi-wild Barbary macaques are an integral feature in Gibraltar's tourism. Gibraltar's economy is dominated by 4 main sectors: financial services, online gambling, shipping, and tourism, which includes duty-free retail sales to visitors. The British military traditionally dominated Gibraltar's economy, with the naval dockyard providing the bulk of economic activity. This, however, has diminished over the last 20 years and is estimated to account for only 7% of the local economy, compared to over 60% in 1984. The territory also has a small manufacturing sector, representing a bit less than 2% of the economy. Gibraltar's labor market employs around 30,000 workers, 80% in the private sector and 20% in the public sector. The unemployment rate is extremely low, at around 1%. More than half, 53%, of the labor force are resident in Spain or are non-Gibraltarians. According to the Government of Gibraltar statistics, around 45% of the total employee jobs and 58% of the private sector jobs are held by frontier workers, employees who are normally resident in Spain but are employed in Gibraltar. Around 63% of the frontier workers are Spanish nationals. More than half, 55%, of the private sector employee jobs are held by persons who are not Gibraltarians or other British nationalities. The public sector, on the other hand, employs mainly Gibraltarians and other British, 90%. As a consequence, according to Fabian Picardo, Chief Minister of Gibraltar, during Brexit negotiations, a frontier which lacked the necessary fluidity for people to be able to access their places of work would put directly at risk nearly half of the jobs of the Gibraltar workforce. In the early 2000s, many bookmakers and online gaming operators moved to Gibraltar to benefit from operating in a regulated jurisdiction with a favorable corporate tax regime. This corporate tax regime for non-resident controlled companies was phased out by January 2011 and replaced by a still favorable fixed corporate tax rate of 10%. Tourism is also a significant industry. Gibraltar is a popular port for cruise ships and attracts day visitors from resorts in Spain. The Rock is a popular tourist attraction, particularly among British tourists and residents in the southern coast of Spain. It is also a popular shopping destination, and all goods and services are VAT-free, but may be subject to Gibraltar taxes. Many of the large British high street chains have branches or franchises in Gibraltar, including Morrisons, Marks & Spencer, and Mothercare. Branches and franchises of international retailers, such as Tommy Hilfiger and Sunglass Hut, are also present in Gibraltar, as is the Spanish clothing company Mango. A number of British and international banks have operations based in Gibraltar. Gist Bank claims to be the oldest bank in the country, based on Gist's acquisition in 1987 of Banco Galliano, which began operations in Gibraltar in 1855. An ancestor of Barclays, the Anglo-Egyptian Bank, entered in 1888, and Credit Foncier, now Credit Agricole, entered in 1920. There is some manufacturing activity, representing around 2% of the total employment. One company, Bassadone Automotive Group, supplies ambulances and other project vehicles converted locally from SUV vehicles to the United Nations and other agencies, employing some 320 staff across its range of activities. In 1967, Gibraltar enacted the Companies, Taxation and Concessions Ordinance, now an Act, which provided for special tax treatment for international business. 97. This was one of the factors leading to the growth of professional services, such as private banking and captive insurance management. Gibraltar has several attractive attributes as a financial center, including a common law legal system and access to the EU single market in financial services. Gibraltar is considered a high-class jurisdiction and is listed on the White List by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, due to its highly regulated financial and e-gaming sectors, sharing the same status as the UK, USA, and Germany. 98. It is internationally collaborative, including in the exchange of information on tax matters. In January 2018, Gibraltar introduced a regulatory framework for distributed ledger technology, with the aim of pursuing a more flexible, adaptive approach in the case of novel business activities, products, and business models. The Financial Services Commission, FSC, which was established by an ordinance in 1989, now an act, that took effect in 1991, regulates the finance sector. In 1997, the Department of Trade and Industry established its Gibraltar Finance Center, GFC, division to facilitate the development of financial sector development. As of 2012, Gibraltar has 0.103 Big Four accounting firm offices per 1,000 population, the second highest in the world after the British Virgin Islands, and 0.6 banks per 1,000 people, the fifth most banks per capita in the world. 103 as of 2017. There is very significant uncertainty on continuing access to the EU single market after the forthcoming Brexit. The currency of Gibraltar is the Gibraltar pound, issued by the government of Gibraltar under the terms of the 1934 Currency Notes Act. These banknotes are legal tender in Gibraltar alongside Bank of England banknotes. In a currency board arrangement, these notes are issued against reserves of sterling. Clearing and settlement of funds is conducted in sterling. Coins in circulation follow British denominations, but have separate designs. Unofficially, most retail outlets in Gibraltar accept the euro, though some payphones and the Royal Gibraltar Post Office, along with all other government offices, do not. Demographics. Gibraltar is one of the most densely populated territories in the world, with a usually resident population in 2012 of 111, equivalent to approximately 4,959/km2, 12,840/SQME. The growing demand for space is being increasingly met by land reclamation. Reclaimed land makes up approximately 1/10 of the territory's total area, but houses over 40% of its population. 2012 census. Ethnic groups. According to the 2012 Gibraltar census, 25,444 people, 79%, were eligible for Gibraltarian status. Of the rest, 4,249, 13.2%, were other British, 675, 2.1%, were Spanish, 522, 1.6%, were Moroccan, and 785, 2.4%, had other EU nationalities. There were 519 people, 1.6%, with other nationalities. Usually resident population and persons present in Gibraltar. Resident census 1981-3, 1991-3, 2001-3, 2012-3. Gibraltarians 74.9%, 75%, 83.2%, 79%. UK and other British 14%, 14.3%, 9.6%, 13.2%. Moroccan 8.1%, 6.7%, 3.5%, 1.6%. Other nationalities, asterisk, 3.1%, 4%, 3.7%, 6.2%. Spanish, 1.19%, 113, 2.1%. Other EU, 1.0%, 113, 1.6%. Main article, Languages of Gibraltar. The official language of Gibraltar is English and is used by the government and in schools. Most locals are bilingual, also speaking Spanish. However, because of the varied mix of ethnic groups which reside there, other languages are also spoken on the Rock. Berber and Arabic are spoken by the Moroccan community, as are Hindi and Sindhi by the Indian community. Maltese is spoken by some families of Maltese descent. Gibraltarians often converse in Lanido, a vernacular unique to Gibraltar. It is based on Andalusian Spanish, with a strong mixture of British English and elements from languages such as Maltese, Portuguese, Genoese Italian, and Taketia, a Judeo-Spanish dialect. Lanido also often involves code switching to English and Spanish. The English language is becoming increasingly dominant in Gibraltar, with the younger generation speaking little or no Lanido despite learning Spanish in school. Gibraltarians often call themselves Lanidos.
this airplane just landing in airport.